Okay, so this is the first one I'm recording of this little series called Adventurous Algorithms. It's all about problem solving. It's not about exam questions like most of the videos are that I've put on this channel so far. This first one is about substrings, but just before that, what are the aims of this little series of videos? Well, it's not specifically about National 5 or higher or advanced higher. These are not exam questions. It's not meant to help you specifically with exam techniques. These are things that are more like extension tasks. Now, rather than just giving you the next bit of material, so say you're in 4th year and you're finding National 5 a bit easy, rather than just saying, well, here's some higher stuff, or look, here's a cool API that you can play with. This is all about giving you maybe a kind of sideways step and showing you some cool algorithmic stuff that you can do, and then maybe it will give you an idea for something that you could write in your own program. So these are all open-ended problems, challenges, designed to make you think, to explore for yourself, to stretch you a little bit, and to make you come up with your own solution for something that we've explored. I'm using Python for these, but you don't have to. The focus isn't about syntax or about particular libraries that you can add. It's about problem solving. Where I'm using specific things like, in this case, a substring, that's something that you're going to find an operation for in most high-level languages. And the same as when I talk about arrays, you're going to find arrays exemplified in whatever language you're using for National 5 or higher, or advanced higher, or whatever. So if you're using VB or C# or Java or whatever, then that's going to be fine as well. So why do we do substrings? In this video I'll give you a little example of a sentence checker. So for example, we want to check if a string starts with a capital letter and ends with a full stop. So is it a sentence? If you're down higher, then you'll find that it comes up in exam questions, but like I've said, that's not the focus here, so I'm not going to look at particular exam questions. Two of the episodes that I'm recording for this series, or that I've already recorded, use substrings. So there's one about palindromes, and there's one that's called pi voltage, which is to do with approximating pi, and it's a thing I did with a maths friend of mine. So I'll put the links to those up there. So what is a substring? Well, first of all, we know what a string is. And a string is a data type that we cover at National 5. Chances are if you're watching this, you probably quite a comfortable programmer and you're really familiar with that and you know what a string is, and it's not going to be any shock to you. That string is a variable type that could store text, so I want to store maybe one character, one letter, symbol, digit, or I want to store a whole load of them. And sometimes you'll see it described as a sequence. It's not a sequence in the math sense. It could be an arbitrary list, right? There's no pattern to it. So it's just a list of characters, one after the other, a series of characters. A substring is when we get individual characters or a group of characters out of that. So say I only want to get one letter, or I want to get the first word out of that, because it might be a longer string, it might be a whole AC in there, and I just want to get one word out of it. That's what's called a substring. And this is useful for a lot of algorithms where you want to traverse an array effectively. So if you've already come across the traversing an array algorithm, there are a lot of times where you're going to want to go through a string and get one letter at a time, or 2 or 3 letters, or an arbitrary number of letters out of your string at a time. Now, in some programming languages, a string is literally just stored as an array of characters, right? There's maybe not an actual string construct, or it's just what we call syntactic sugar, so it's something that sits on top of it, that there's some nice syntax for it, but actually deep down it's maybe just being stored as an array of characters. We use Python, so it doesn't work in quite the same way at the back end, but we don't really care about that at this point. The syntax for a substring is basically going to be the same syntax that you've used for an array in Python. So I could get one character out of it with some square brackets. So if I've got whatever the variable is called, square bracket 0, that's going to get the first character out of it, just like it would get the first element out of an array. This is using Python, like I say, but if you were wanting to use like VB or something, then there's a function called mid that does a similar job. Mid as in it's somewhere in the middle of the string, right? And there are ones for the start and the end as well. And you'll find that there's equivalents in whatever programming language you're using. So I've got my little laser pointer here just so that I can jump about. Say I've got a string variable called message, right? This is how Python would do it. Now we can see how the Python syntax below looks quite like an array because I've got square brackets. Now if I say array well list, that's because I might do an episode later in this little series about the fact that actually we call these arrays because that's what the SQA wants us to use in all programming languages. Actually in Python these are not arrays, these are lists. For what you're doing, there's no real difference and it doesn't really matter, but actually there are some differences between arrays and lists, and there's some cool stuff that you can do with lists, and I might look at that later. First letter, a variable, equals message square bracket 0. So that's just like if I was getting the first item out of an array and I had square bracket 0, and these are 0 indexed, so that means that this 0 is H, and E is 1, and L is 2, and so on, right? So first of all there, in that first line of code, the message equals 0, right? Then that would be getting me H. Then if I went for fifth letter equals message 4, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, so that would get me O. And then last letter equals message -1. Now this is something kind of cool that we can do in Python, and you'll find that if you're using a different programming language, there will be different syntaxes that you can use for this. But in Python, if I say -1, that's just a cool way of coming in from the end. So if I either don't know the length of the string, and it saves me working out the length and then subtracting one, or if, you know, it just makes it easier sometimes to read, because if I'd put in a 10 or 11 in there, it might look like a kind of arbitrary number. If I say -1, we know that's always going to be the last one in there. So actually -1 gets me D. So it's useful to get one character. For example, let's check that a sentence starts with a capital letter, ends with full stop. But sometimes if we want a range of characters, maybe I want the first word. Maybe I want to loop through it until I get to a space and then say, oh, that must be a word. So what I could use here is this syntax that I put down the bottom, and it's probably a little bit small there. Message equals 0:5. So again, that's a specific Python syntax, but you'll find similar ways that you do that, maybe using a comma or something in a different programming language. Message 0:5 is going to give me from 0 up to just before 5. Now, the reason that it's 5 there, if you're a Python programmer and you do loops and you had like a for loop that went from in range 0 up to 5, it would stop before it got to the 5. It would go like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and the same thing applies here. So 0 to 5 would go characters 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. It wouldn't include that extra character on there, right? So it's just a little bit clumsy. If you're using something like VB, you'll find that the syntax is different and the numbers will end in a different place. Right, so I've got a little demo here with some Python code, and if I run a code here, let's say message equals hello YouTubers, and then if I said print message 0, that should give me an H, right? Because it's going to give me the first character. If I said print message 7, not 7, not 70, then it's going to give me O, right? It's that character there. So that's one character at a time. If I want a range of characters, so let's say I put 7:10, and if I run that, it's going to give me the word out. It's this, right? It's characters 7 to 10 out of that. If I said maybe show me character -1, then it's going to give me the last character in it. Now let's say I want to find one word. I'll put a comment here that says find one word. I want to loop through it, and it's like traversing an array if you've done that in National 5. So for I in range, the length of message, right? So just how many characters are in the message. And let's say car equals message I. And first of all, we'll just do print car. So this should run, and it will give me one character at a time. So it's not doing that vertically, it's looping and it's printing one character at a time. Now if I change that, and let's say only print capital letters, and let's say give that a Y, then say if, Python trick you can do, there's is upper and is lower, two functions that will tell you whether something's a capital letter or not. Don't use them in an exam question, because there's ways that you would have to work that out in an exam with ASCII codes and things, but for the sake of this, we don't need to write that out. We can just use the built-in function. So if I said if car dot is upper, then print car, and this time it's only going to print capital letters, so it's only got H and Y. If I made that is lower, then I'm only going to get, oops, spell mistake in there. So is lower, so I'm getting it without the two capital letters, the H and the Y. So this is looping through and getting one character at a time. Let's say I want to find where the space is. So I'm going to change this so that it says find the first word. And I'm going to say space position equals -1. So we've got one character. If the character equals space, then we're going to print space found, and we're going to store the position where we found the space in it. So say I find that in the 5th or 6th run through of the loop, then I would have the value 5 in that variable. So if I said space position equals I, now at the end, let's say print space found at I. Or sorry, not I, space position. It's difficult doing a live demo. So if I run that, and it says space found, space was found at character 5. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's found at the right place. Now if I just want to get a word, I could get a substring that goes until the end of the first word. So in other words, until you find a space. And let's say word equals message 0 to space position, and then print word. And that will take like all the characters starting from character 0 up until wherever it found that space. So it will give me the first word. There you go. Hello. And that would work if I change the message as well. So I put this is a demo. Then it's going to give me the word this, which is a different length. Oh, this is a. Now, why is it doing that? I do know the answer. As it loops through here, every time it finds a space, it's updating space position. So that's giving me space position be set here, because it's saying space found, then it's saying found, and then it's saying space found. So if you were doing this for yourself, that might be a problem that you encounter the first time you run it. Now, there's different ways around this. I could say if that's the character and it's not already been found yet, I could have a conditional loop. I could end the loop early. So I'm kind of going to leave it up to you, because again, the whole idea was that this is for, capable programmers to think about it for yourself, to think if there's a way that you could get it so that it stops once it gets to the first space, or only records the first space and it doesn't keep changing it after that. Right? And there's things that you could do inside that if statement. You could put an and in there, or you could look up for yourself how do you end a loop early. Now, last thought here about substrings. It's a little kind of test or a little bit of problem solving doing it. So I'm wearing a substring t-shirt, and I put a photo of that on here. If you're new to substrings, then you can try figuring out this message. And it's also got a couple of other things. It's got some weird syntax with like colon, -1. It's got an array on one of the lines, so an array that's got me and you, and it's getting element 1 from that array. It's also using a split function, which is another string function. So what I thought you could do is, if you're watching these, and you're probably going to be a more capable programmer, and if you don't already know those, you can look them up. Now, if you go and check out the most straightforward one, would be Python string slice. So a slice is this idea of using a colon for a substring in Python, right? That's specifically what it would be called in Python. You can look that up on something like W3 Skills, and then pause the video and leave it with that puzzle up and see if you can work out what that message is.